We are live again, and this might be the final episode of Progressives for Trump, because that whole container is over now that Trump is successfully elected. These are just some like closing thoughts that we're sharing here from West Asheville.
Yeah.
Would you like to start?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's no need to convince people to vote for Trump now because that's happened. So it's a very different energy now of like, at least for me, what I would want to say or talk about. Yeah, I mean, I guess first just acknowledging like the relief I've been feeling in my body. And also it's been really challenging because most people around me, and I'm guessing around you, are not Trump supporters, and many of them like actively despise Trump. So that's been pretty challenging to have such a different emotional experience from the people around me, which wasn't as strong pre-election because it was, but now it's like the result is there, and there's like, very like big division between emotional experiences. So that's been tough. And then another thing that's been exciting that I've noticed is like a lot of people who voted for Harris or didn't but really don't like Trump have been like invigorated, like in an angry way for their causes, which to me is actually like a good thing. Like it's creating deeper alignment by being like, God damn, okay, like my country at a high level is not standing for my causes, so now there's like more fire in my own life.
Right.
Which I think is awesome, and is like I would encourage that response actually, because that's part of what we're talking about as well, of this like more decentralized model is all causes, like being made alive by citizens themselves. So I feel really excited about that.
What has been like an example of that you've seen? That sounds really nice, and I'm curious, what is like a actual example of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's too early for like actions to have emerged from that. But I've just heard people just kind of feeling like they've got like shook awake of like, I have to stand much more deeply for these values of embodiment, of being more like connected to my animal self, being like in my love zone, being like loving towards people. From having this like, damn, now that this is the narrative, the dude in the White House is like, has this dominator culture energy. So now there's like more responsibility on me to hold the world that I care about. Which I'm in alignment on that too, So and even though we're coming at it from opposite angles in terms of the political alignment, the underlying energy there has a similar flavor to it. So I feel excited about that.
Individual entrepreneurial energy is partly what I'm hearing in that, and
yeah, I mean they probably wouldn't call it entrepreneurial energy, but you could call it that. Yeah,
enterprising.
Well, that's because that still has like the capitalist flavor to it, and a lot of it is just like showing up in your life in a different way, or like your commitments and your social containers. So I would maybe entrepreneurial is part of it. I would call it entrepreneurial too, but I think the broader category is like creative energy, maybe.
Self-driven.
Yeah. So that's been cool. And then I guess maybe an invitation that we could explore is now that we live in like Trump world, like what does that mean for people, or like what are ways to live in that for both people who supported Trump and people who didn't support Trump.
Yeah, like that. And I'm gonna just set a timer so that this thing doesn't stop recording and we are not aware that it stopped recording, because it just cuts off after 30 minutes. Yeah, interesting. I want to just affirm or support that orientation of like, great, you're pissed about something, do something about it. And in that sense, I'm grateful that Trump, in my view, presents this like boogeyman to so many humans, so that they can like project all of the horrible shit on him. But then if that wakes them up into action and they go like, oh yeah, I'm gonna fucking move to Louisiana or somewhere and drive the grassroots anti-abortion movement, like abortion access movement there. Like, do it. Great. That's the whole point of this, in my view, of like pushing power down to the masses, pushing power down to the states. Like, go and live in places where you think change needs to happen, progressive change needs to happen, instead of sitting at your keyboards and then kind of wanting that to be imposed from the top. Do bring about the change that you want to bring about. And in the whole frame of progressives for Trump for me was, that is a culture I want to see continue. And I also feel like a massive relief in my body, just to kind of address, like, I'm just like, oh, thank God. And I'll say that on election day, I was like, if Harris wins, it's status quo, continues. It's not that, it's not great. This was like a great chance at switching something. Did not happen, but Trump has already been successful by like kicking out establishment Republicans from the Republican Party. So one party is cleansed.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of like, passionate America first people. It's so beautiful to see like people having differing views in their America first orientation. Like Vivek Ramaswamy talks about how like he and JD Vance have different orientations around being America first, and that to me is like so healthy. Like, it's like, let's look at the goal that we want to go towards. Let's have a vision, and then let's have differing angles, and let's respect each other and stay connected, that we are still like wanting to create something beautiful. And so in that sense, Trump was successful from my perspective, whether he got elected or not.
Yeah, I see that too with like RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, who are also, especially RFK, like with the environment, is like the opposite of Trump.
Yeah, that's a good counterbalance.
And also is focused on like the healthy aspect of it, which Trump doesn't really care about personally that much. So that's really, and Tulsi Gabbard also talked about this when she joined the Republican Party. She was like, the Republican Party is very different from what it used to be. It's become like very inclusive and open, and like is a place where people with differing viewpoints, but who are committed to America, can come together and like it can hold those different viewpoints, which is cool.
That's the beauty of having a person who has been a CEO be a president.
Oh yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought of that angle.
In order to run big corporations, it doesn't matter whether you're a narcissist or not. At some point, you have to recognize that people are going to differ in your opinion. Like, I was never the CEO, but I've been in large corporations and worked in large teams and led, small teams of a certain size. And even in that, I was like, okay, I'm not going to like everyone I work with, but what is the skill set they're bringing? And how do we like collaborate through that skill set? And it is so beautiful that Trump has given RFK the mandate on these things, even though seemingly they are very, they don't seem aligned. Like RFK's healthy lifestyle and Trump's lifestyle is like completely different. But he sees that RFK's orientation resonates with what people want, because he has an ear to the ground of what people want, and he's like, okay, run with it, make the changes that you need to make.
I think he also cares about children and sees RFK's like devotion to healthy children, and that's a big part of why like he himself is not healthy, and he wouldn't want to be forced to have a healthy lifestyle himself, nor would he want like people to be forced to have a healthy lifestyle, but he would love children to be given a healthy lifestyle. So I feel that is where that energy is coming from. And somewhat related to that, I made a list the other day of like predictions I had, which was a great exercise, and I encourage everyone actually to this, both whether you have like positive predictions that you're expecting or negative. Because I noticed post-election, like talking with people and also people responding, I posted that list on Facebook and some people responded with like a counter list. And I noticed like there's you can like almost put them like this, like the positive and the negative prediction. You can put them like this. And a lot of it has to do with like underlying assumptions about like, one, the sincerity of Trump. So a lot of the counterpoints is like, he says that, but he's just going to like, enrich corporations, or now he's going to like do an abortion ban now that he can, and all this kind of stuff. So even though he's said he's not doing those things, so lack of sincerity, and then also lack of like knowing the kind of nitty gritty of what his policy proposals were, and just knowing the higher level like narrative of what they were, like with the abortion ban, for example, like him having said he's not going to do that many times, but people only having heard the narrative that he was. And then also like the effects of the policies. So some of my predictions were like, for example, 10% increase in like reading, writing, and math skills.
Yeah, it's an interesting prediction.
And so that was in 4 years. So that was my prediction. And then people were like, I don't think his policies are going to do that. So those are the 3 levels of disagreement. And all of those are going to be like proven in the next 4 years.
Right.
And I think that was the benefit for me of most of them are like quantitative, like X% in X amount of years. Or like peace in Ukraine within 6 months was one. Like, and so they're just very tangible, like things that are clearly testable, which is I think really helpful because then when you come back, there's no fuzziness in being like, okay, either I could be totally wrong. Like if more than 50% of those turn out to be wrong, then I'll be like, okay, I misjudged. And then conversely, if with the negative predictions, and again, this is very different now that he's elected. It's no longer like we should elect him. I think now it's like, what can we learn about the world? This is one piece of how we can relate to it. What can we learn about the world by testing what we think is going to happen with what actually happens? And specifically with Trump, I think that's really juicy because our view is like we trust in Trump's sincerity and we see his policies and we see his reasoning for the policies having the effect they're going to have. And at least for me, we agree with those. So that's my worldview, and then if that's wrong, then I would have to question like how I trust people, and there's various. It would have like fairly large consequences for how I relate to the world. And conversely, if you're of the view that either he's not sincere, or he's evil, or he wants to be a dictator, or his morals are like totally horrible, and he's going to do terrible things to trans people and to immigrants and stuff like that. And like, I mean, I don't just mean deporting them, but like do things that are like very like brutal, I guess.
To like, illegal immigrants, like specifically. Like, And I think sometimes like Jimmy Fallon had not Jimmy Fallon, I forget what his name, Kimmel or someone had this like whole response where he's like crying and he's like, it's so bad. And he's like really moved and I can feel his heart. But I'm like, bro, like, you're probably crying about something that's happened to you in childhood. Just find a space. And he's like, oh, it's so bad for immigrants and they don't realize it now. I'm like, it's annoying, to have like someone have that attitude of this is you.
A piece of that for me as well that's been pretty alive in me the last few days actually is like the 300,000 unaccounted for children, which is like, so first of all, they like gave all their possessions to the drug cartels to get to the U.S. It's like $5,000, and the drug cartels run that whole process, and then they get robbed on the way often. So they arrive to the U.S. with nothing, whereas they started with at least something. And they've probably been sold a false vision of what's going to await them in the U.S. They're like, you're going to just get all the welfare benefits, and we're going to take care of you so well. We're going to, because they're children, so they're probably getting manipulated really badly. Then they get to the U.S. They don't have any possessions. The drug cartels like control them because the drug cartels brought them there. They don't have any legal rights, right? They can't defend themselves with legal rights. And the police like can't defend them because they don't have rights, like because they're not citizens. So like the amount of trafficking that's happening, and there's 450,000 unaccompanied children that have entered. 300,000 are like not accounted for. They could be anywhere, and it's so that's been really alive for me as well. And then the narrative of like Trump getting elected is going to be bad for illegal immigrants. My counterpoint is like, well, actually, the process of being an illegal immigrant, like for a lot of people, is horrible, and there's a lot of like really dark shit happening in that web, and that is going to stop now, and that's like a huge positive for these people that are getting, and some of them I'm sure are getting into the U.S. and having a good life as a result, but there's also a lot of like really, and again like child trafficking, like rape and these are like terrible things. These are not casual side effects. But zooming out from that rabbit hole, or unless you want to go deeper into it, but that was just, that feels important to share as well.
I'd written
that it's
about
not, I guess just to finish that is like, it's not black and white of like, oh, and then another thing is like, deporting people doesn't have to be like a brutal, violent process necessarily. Like, it's not going to be fun because you came to the U.S. and now you're going to leave the U.S., but like, it's not necessarily like,
from the perspective of a child who's being sex trafficked.
Well,
it could have this, I don't know how it's going to turn out, but it could have this like, oh, I'm being saved from people who are like selling me for like $50 to being raped and sent back to my home. Like, thank God, it's like, I think in that kind of, oh, deporting immigrants is bad, there is this subtle like assumption that life in America is better than anywhere else and everyone needs to come here. But no, it's not that. That's not the case for many humans who come here. And actually, like, I'm reminded of an anecdote shared by this like Dutch Surinamese friend of mine of Indian origin around how her ancestors were in like British India were told that, you know, come, there are these opportunities and you'll earn so much money, and it's like a 2 week contract role. You just hop on the ship and come for work. We're going to take you and you're going to earn a lot of money. Your family will be taken care of for the rest of its life. And they never came back. Like, they were just taken to Suriname in South America and like put into plantations, like Indian people, and they just became Surinamese, and they were told that they would be back in 2 weeks with enough money. So it's like, you know, immigration isn't always great. Immigration can, like, yes, immigrants come with hopes, but many times those hopes get dashed. And in those situations, actually the right thing to do is rescue them and send them back to where they came from, so that their societies can take, like, you know, address that problem. Like, why is this happening, that people are leaving our country and like getting raped elsewhere? Like, that is something that needs to be addressed in their countries.
And also the fact that the drug cartels run that process. Like, the drug cartels are horrible people, you know, like they're like they're I think there's a narrative of like, oh, illegal immigration is like a hopeful, exciting process.
Illegal or legal?
Illegal. Legal is a hopeful, exciting process, but illegal is like, it's very different from legal, and it's run by drug cartels currently. Like, it's illegal. Like, illegal things are run by criminal organizations that don't have any oversight, and by definition, as a criminal organization, like, don't have moral bounds on their behavior. And this is one of my predictions, actually, is that the legal immigration system is going to be reformed, and there's going to be an increase in legal immigration. Interesting. Is one of my predictions. And, you know, maybe it won't happen, but I think that's important to note as well, is that Trump is not anti-immigration and has come out pro-legal immigration many times. And me too, and I think a lot of Trump supporters are very excited about legal immigration and bringing more people into this country, but having them go through, like, first of all, a safe process where there's like, you know, there's guardrails on how they end up in the country, and then also they're like smoothed into the country. You know, there's like processes for helping immigrants like enter the country in a smoother way, and also like understand like the language, for example, like learning the language and being like put into society in a way that's not like doesn't have all these kind of non-boundaried situation that, as we're talking about with these like kids and all the other stuff that's going on. So,
it's like healthy integration, right? It's like, if you have a house and people just start showing up and staying there, and you just keep welcoming them, like, at some point your own routines and systems are going to get disrupted.
Right, yeah. There's the long-term, I think that's the important part as well, like the long-term well-being, even of the immigrants and also of society at large. Require, like, the sustainability, I guess, of the, you know, the culture of America that people are drawn to. That's part of that.
Zooming back to this, I like that prompt of, you know, post-Trump election world. And you said, I'm curious what was in your mind around. I like that orientation.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of it is like being open to the possibility that good things happen.
Right.
And not expecting it necessarily, because like we live in a very different information environment from most people that are anti-Trump. And so, like, I understand why people that are anti-Trump are anti-Trump. Like, I can see where that comes from their information environment. You know, we're all living in these like filter bubbles. And, you know, and I would say I think we've like gone out of our way to break our filter bubble and have greater access to the truth. But
on the flip side, people on the opposite side would say that we have gotten brainwashed enough and actually gotten into a filter bubble. Like, that's kind of
right, exactly. And so now it's the, like, in a way, like, the exciting thing about the next 4 years is now we're going to see what happens.
Right.
And that's going to be helpful for everyone to get a like better sense for what are the filter bubbles and like what are, like, it could help break narratives, maybe for us and maybe for other people, depending what happens.
Yeah.
And that was, just to finish that thought, is also with the predictions, I feel like that's essential to, because otherwise there's this like fuzziness. Like in my own life, every Sunday I write down like intuitive hypotheses I have, and then like set a reminder to test them later or to verify them, which is really helpful because like you almost forget, you know, like if you make a wrong prediction, if you haven't written it down, you know, there's like a cognitive bias that you just forget that you even
What's like
made
an
it.
example of that in your regular life that you do?
The one that I've forgotten, or you mean a hypothesis?
Like an intuitive hypothesis that you have written down.
Well, one is like Trump will win in a landslide. So that was one. But then also personal things, like someone will respond to me in this particular way. You know, it's like the whole range. Or like I will, you know, once I take a trip to XYZ, I'm going to have this effect on my
for the
body and
week,
psyche.
What are you predicting, and then how did your prediction match?
Yeah, exactly. And some of them are like in 8 years, like very long-term things, and some of them are like the next day.
I see. Fascinating.
And so applying that to Trump. Oh, and then I'm like very invested in that process now because it has huge positive effects. Because when I'm like literally looking at like writing that's like I predicted this and it's literally exactly wrong, I can't avoid it, you know, like, and it does something different to my system than when I just have a vague memory, but I kind of, you know, let myself forget that I ever made this wrong prediction. And also when I'm right, it's like, oh shit, this thing that was like uncertain, like for example the landslide, like I felt quite strongly based on the signals I was picking up that he was going to win in a landslide. But you know, the polls weren't showing that, and a lot of people didn't think that.
What were the signals that you had picked up around the landslide?
Well, a lot of it was the last few interviews that him and JD Vance did. Like I feel like they opened the range of like attractability that they had. So that was one. Two was the early voting statistics of Democrat versus Republican, which like massively increased in Republican representation relative to 2020. And then third was the Twitter sphere, is like just I was seeing so many Democrats posting, I am voting Trump for the first time. Here's why. Like a shocking amount, and I was seeing also partially because of the filter bubble, but I was getting Democrats in my feed as well that were like anti-Trump, and I tried going into the, like, you know, I went into the filter bubble of anti-Trumpers, like through searching hashtags, and there was no person who was Republican who was like voted Trump in 2020, and now I'm voting for her. Like there was none of that, and I was seeing like literally like probably hundreds over the course of a week, people going in the other direction. And then also just like statistics and all kinds of things. And also I'm sure you saw a lot of these as well, people who like would go into neighborhoods in swing states and like ask people on the street, like, how are you feeling? Who are you voting for? And then just noticing the energy of like a shocking number of people, like for example in like the hood in Atlanta, someone would go in and then would just interview a bunch of people, and so many of them were like really passionately voting for Trump and saying they had voted for Harris in 2020.
I see. All of the Indians, Indians in New Jersey,
for example. And also like the Amish in Pennsylvania and the Jews in New York. There was just all these groups that were like shifting. And then you saw that in the election map where like all the I don't know if you saw this map, but it showed per county which direction did it shift, and they were all red. Like literally, like there was maybe one or two little blue dots. And every single, like across the US, all counties shifted Republican.
Interesting.
In proportionally.
Because it was a pretty significant popular vote margin too, right? Like I think it was a massive popular vote margin. There was like
it was pretty big,
no doubt. For me, that moment was, I saw that video of the Arab Americans in Michigan, a bunch of Arab American leaders coming forth and being like, like Trump will
exactly, that kind of stuff too. I saw that too. And when all the Hispanic leaders were praying for him, I don't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't see that.
That was like Trump was sitting in the middle, and there were maybe like 50 Hispanic like leaders and religious figures all like praying together for Trump to win. So those kinds of things is like, those were the signals I was picking up on. That points to something in the energy that I feel like for me is more important than the polls. But anyways, back to the list of predictions. So I feel like with Trump, this is particularly valuable because there's such a strong level of opinion about it. For us, as well as people who voted against Trump. Like I feel very confident that list, most of those things are going to happen. And conversely, people who think he's going to be Hitler or who think he's going to like mess with LGBTQ rights, as far as I can tell, feel very confident in that as well. So just having it like written down, ideally publicly, is really helpful to, and
Right.
then being open to like if they turn out to be wrong, to be like, I missed something in terms of like who Trump is, and also maybe in terms of like what the people who are anti-Trump, what they were saying and why they were saying it.
Yeah, and this is, I also feel like this is a good strategy for those people watching who are Trump supporters who get into these arguments where there are like doomsday prophecies coming from, anti-Trumpers. This could be an offer they could make. Like, okay, like,
Right.
could you elucidate what the doomsday prophecies are, and let's write it down. Like, they can kind of help that process. Like, sure, okay, I hear that you have concerns about Trump. Like, what are your fears? Can we write them down? And then come back in a year to evaluate. And I think like
Right.
that's a very different angle almost of engaging than
Right.
like I've gotten into some head butting things, and it's pretty exhausting.
Yeah.
Because like that despair is just like once one is subsumed in that despair and it's like projecting out, it doesn't matter what counter evidence you present.
Yeah.
Let's check. Okay, I'll finish this thought,
Okay, cool.
and then I'll have to restart the video.
Cool.
Yeah, once when one is subsumed in like despair and like projecting out wherever they look, it doesn't matter what objective. It's also like a very panicky despair. It's not even like, oh yeah, this is not gonna happen. It's like, oh my god, like everywhere it's gonna be horrible. And in that panicky state of despair, all you can really do is like soothe someone instead of project. If you present to them like, oh, like how about this? Have you considered this? They just like turn somewhere else where they can continue that connection to the panicky despair.
Right. Yeah. I've witnessed
So
that a
this
few times.
angle of like, okay, like I hear that you're worried. What are your worries? Let's look at them. Let's revisit in 6 months, and maybe some of them would be true, some of them won't be true. Like that feels very productive.
Yeah, and I feel like I would add a caveat that for some people, I feel like it is like a more specific disagreement they have, that and they would have predictions. Like I witnessed some people who are in that state, but I've also witnessed people who have like, okay, these are the things I think Trump is going to do that are bad, and are willing to engage in that kind of way.
Yeah.
And they're also feeling a level of despair, but I think it has a different quality.
Yeah, I think specifically abortion and trans rights fits into that. I don't think it's like, I feel like there is no way to engage on that. I've tried, and I just feel very defeated in trying to engage on that.
Yeah.
But economy is actually some, like, you mentioned, I came across someone who was a Trump supporter but then voted Harris, and he had this like, I'm going to send you his post. He had this like well thought out, intelligent looking economic prediction of how tariffs are going to just crush the economy. And it sounds all very intelligent, but in my perception, it's like a sequential thing. This will happen, then this will happen, this will happen, and the sequential thing always assumes the worst case scenario in every step, and assumes no responsiveness from the government to each step. So there is that, like, in my perception, flaw in his prediction, where it's just like tracing one disastrous line. It's like in a game theoretic, like you start the game and then the players are just passive and it leads somewhere.
Yeah.
But it might be interesting to discuss that between us. I don't know if we'll create more content. It would be interesting to discuss.
Yeah, with the tariff thing, it's interesting also because I remember back in high school I was learning about the import substitution strategy that a lot of the most successful Asian countries like Korea and stuff used, where they literally imposed high tariffs in order to stimulate the domestic economy, and they became like the most powerful economies in Asia. And Russia is literally just did this successfully. Like they're the fastest growing economy in Europe, despite being sanctioned and at war, because they imposed tariffs in order to stimulate the domestic economy. So it's like there's a lot of there's more examples of countries successfully using tariffs than not.
Yeah, and it can kind of go both ways, because I've also heard of like the US-Germany tariff wars, which did not work out well.
Yeah.
Like, because US imposed tariffs on some German products, but then because of that, German products became expensive, and then competing US companies also hiked up their prices.
Something that what you said about the despair state that you were talking about. I mean, this is an edgy thing to say, but I think if someone were to not, if there's a resistance to making a list of the bad things that would actually happen, I think then there's like an internal trigger exploration to be had of like, then the hatred towards Trump, if it's not based in like he's going to do bad things to the country, which for a lot of people it is, so that's definitely like, and that's I think where this like counter list is really, really helpful, because then it's just going to clarify things for everyone, you know, like in 4 years. But then if there's a resistance to even making a list, I think then probably there's like a internal like trauma trigger coming up that Trump is activating, which he does for so many people, including people who support him, honestly. Like the kind of fawning behavior is like also, I would say, like there's a trauma loop there. And then, like, you know, I think then the journey is to be like, now that he's president, he's going to be president for 4 years. So he's going to be in the field like a lot. So I think it's then really helpful in terms of like learning to cope with that, and also as an opportunity for a healing journey to explore those, whatever those inner triggers are.
And I want to just add something here that, you know, the biggest lie that trauma that exists in human bodies tells those humans is that everyone out there wants to get you. Like, you know, everyone out there, like anyone who has hurt you has done so intentionally. Like that is one of the big fallacies or lies that unprocessed trauma tells us. And the next layer is like, yeah, people are trying to come at you, trying to get you. And that I feel is like what is most alive in this like activation of like grief and, you know, like, oh, despair, oh my God, I'm heartbroken. It's this like it feels like a very edgy provocation to present to people who are going through this. It's like, you know, maybe use this as an opportunity to go inwards and like really release what needs to be released that is coming up, instead of finding like the next human to villainize so that you can stay connected to your suffering and your misery. You know, just, it's good to release these things as they come up. Like if you're like weeping and crying, that's like a good thing. It's like if there are external triggers that happen and that make you like weep intensely, like have this energy of like, oh my God, thank God, finally releasing all of this stuff that is stuck inside me. And then from the clarity that comes from a good weep, look at things and like feel into what you see. Let go of like whatever else you were seeing as you were caught up in the trigger.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that a lot. And then I guess to say that there, just to reiterate again, that for some people there are like legitimate specific things that they're worried about happening to the country. So, because I think the danger here is being like, oh, everyone who hates Trump is just in like a trauma trigger state. And there is like, you know, like there's, as you were saying with the Tariffs dude and like abortion, and there's a lot of legitimate grievances that people have.
Agreed.
And on top of that, what we would consider like being in a false information environment that's propagandist and is saying he's going to do certain things that sound terrifying. And again, we're going to see, maybe we're in the propagandist environment, and we're going to see in the next 4 years.
Maybe he implements an abortion ban in a month,
and then we're like, oh shit, okay, we've been duped.
That, right? Like, that is something, like, what did we miss there? Like the other thought, like, let's explore that a bit. The other thought in my mind has been like, maybe he starts doing things that are listed in Project 2025. Like actually starts doing those things, and that would be interesting for us to track, you know.
That'd be, because that's true.
That was like the main talking point, and we were very dismissive of it. We were like, you know, that's not his stuff. His stuff is Agenda 47.
Right.
And I think that would be an interesting thing for us to track in a journey of evaluating when people lie and when they don't lie. You know, evaluating people's sincerity.
For sure, and I think that's why like Trump specifically feels like a really informative person and the administration to do this like hypothesis thing about, because there's so much wrapped up in that and like how you trust people. Because for us, or I should at least speak for myself, but I think it's the same for you, like we feel Trump's humanity and we feel him being sincere, including in his like flaws, and that gives us trust in him, so that when he says he's not going to do something, we trust him, not because we're just naively trusting him, but because we've seen him be like sincere and authentic. But then maybe, and then for other people, that's a bad sign. The fact that he's saying whatever is on his mind shows that he like doesn't have like a spine, or doesn't have like not a spine, like a central value grounding, and is like unpredictable, and might end up like just doing Project 2025, even though he said he wouldn't, but now he feels like it, you know. And that's, I can see that maybe that's going to be true, you know. And then that would be, for us, would be a wake-up call, like, oh shit, okay, maybe we're tracking on the wrong thing in terms of like what makes a human being trustable. And Trump is a very unique figure for this to be tested, because he's like in power, like massively in power now, because he won the House and the Senate as well. So he can basically do whatever he wants. So he's in power, and he's like uniquely, we would say human, other people would say like aggressive, or however you want to, whatever terms are being used, person. Like most people don't trust other politicians anyways, but with Trump there's a large number of people who do, and a lot of the people who don't are not necessarily not trusting him just because he's a politician. They're not trusting him for like a more human reason.
I see. Interesting.
So it feels more applicable to like daily life almost.
There's something about trust here, and the way I'm orienting towards this is that I've evaluated what he said beyond the noise of what is reported about him, and beyond the noise of his like what I would call like trickster, sarcastic archetype. Like he doesn't hesitate from using sarcasm as a politician, which is rare because politicians typically don't use that. So I've tried to evaluate him beneath that, and I've seen like a certain repeat of what he says, and like, you know, and that is what I'm putting my weight on. And then I've looked at his actions from 2016 to 2020 and be like, oh yeah, that kind of fits the ballpark. And now I'm like, okay, let's see what he does. And now my work as not a citizen, but as a resident of the US is to critically evaluate and present both critique and appreciation for what he does. Like if I choose to continue doing political content, like that's my orientation. Like I'm happy he won. Now my orientation is different. My orientation is like, is he doing the things he's doing? And that helps me learn so much about myself. And it's also my role as a participant in a democracy. You know, it's like that's where I don't feel like a Trumper or something. It's like I really wanted to get him elected. I'm happy that happened. Now let's see what he does, and let's see what is right, what is not, and how I can contribute to the things that I care about.
I feel the same way, and I think a lot of people who voted for him have the same, like, all right bro, now you got to deliver, you know. And like I don't think that if he was to start doing crazy shit, I don't think everyone who voted for him would be like, like it's Trump, so it must be right. Like I think there'd be a backlash there.
I mean, there was already a backlash in 2020 where he lost.
Exactly.
So it's not like, so people have already shown like their flexibility, at least large sliver of people have shown their flexibility.
To some extent, although he did win more votes in 2020 than 2016.
Really?
Yeah. It's just that there were 20 million more Democrat votes that have now disappeared. It's kind of interesting. If you look at a graph, it's like it's pretty much consistent. Like, you know, it's like going like this, like who gets how many votes. And then in 2020, like Trump's goes up and the Democrats goes like way up, and then it fell back down to the normal level this year. So there was like a weird 20 million person spike in 2020 that's gone again now.
I see. Maybe that's where the concerns about fraud come from. I see. Interesting. I didn't know that.
And then I guess the more charitable like interpretation is like in 2020, people like believed that Trump was gonna like destroy everything,
Right.
and so like a bunch of people who usually don't vote
Yeah.
went and voted. And this time around, they were like, "Nah, fuck
Whatever.
that! Like this,
Yeah.
I don't believe this
No
narrative anymore. I'm just not gonna vote." So
Yeah. Sweet. Yeah, this feels good to pause, close, and I'm just appreciating this journey with you. I feel like it brought up so much. It helps cement so many concepts for me, like as I've shared before with you, like even the name Progressives for Trump wasn't alive in me till I spoke with you, and I realized it's actually not liberals for Trump, it's actually progressives for Trump. And I am not a liberal in the sense that I want everything to be like liberal. I'm actually consider myself someone who's wants to balance liberalism with conservatism in service of progress. So it feels really right to be progressive, and it feels like the broader work that I see for us is to take back progressivism from despair-filled people who just lack vision. Like currently, like the people driving progressivism are filled with despair. They haven't done their work, and they lack a vision. And
totally.
People like us need to take it back.
And I think what we've talked about in our previous vision as well is that in many ways they're anti-progressive and have put on the cloak of progressivism for the sake of power, but are actually anti-progressive. So I totally agree with that. And it's been super exciting journey, and it's been cool to go from like thinking about these things and stuff, and now we're like, and also just in conversation, I feel like a lot has emerged of like how much we care about this, and the fact that we do actually have a vision, each of us individually and also together, that is like already coherent in a way,
right?
And a large part of it is we don't know yet, like what progress entails long term. So not vision in the sense that we have a clear path, but vision in the sense that we have a pretty clear sense of like what are the issues with the current quote unquote progressivism that's actually anti-progressive in some ways, and in some ways not, and then what's the alternative like holding container long term. So and that could only have emerged in connection with
Beautiful.
You. So,
and we did it. Congratulations.
We did it,
I mean, I think it had an impact on at least some level of impact in our community, and just feeling. I feel like it is my life's work to speak to places where people are afraid of speaking up, so that they can see me speaking and go, okay, I can hold this view. I can hold this view, and I don't need to be afraid. Like that shows up for me in both my childhood sexual trauma work and Progressives for Trump.
I think it speaks to your integrity, the fact that those are the two things that you've done content about, because they're not related by like a superficial frame. If you were just doing it superficially, you would not do those two things. You would only do those two things if you were like truly like in integrity and in authenticity about doing what you just said. So
beautiful.
You're definitely like fully in that.
I appreciate that.
Which is beautiful and inspiring.
Sweet.
And I guess I would also invite people, if they've watched this far and haven't watched our other videos, those might be helpful as well. If any of this has resonated, if it's all just not resonating, then probably not. But if it's slightly resonating, now that he's going to be here for another 4 years, it might help you like feel more ease around that. Or at least have openness to an alternative frame of what might happen.
That's definitely one of the direct feedback pieces I received from a Harris voter who was in deep anxiety and panic about Trump getting elected. And he was like, look, watching your content just feels like, okay, it's not going to be the end of the world.
Oh, nice.
Which was nice. And
I've heard that as well from one person. So cool.
Okay, lovely. Leave us any thoughts. This journey comes to a close, and look forward to what emerges next.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.